Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Soldiers To Sidelines webinar, Coaching Legends and American Heroes. I'm so grateful that everybody made time tonight to come see this awesome show where we feature an American hero. And tonight it's Major General Brian Menase. And our coaching legend is the head rugby coach at Army West Point, Matt Sherman. And I just want to say thank you to all of our sponsors and donors who make these awesome opportunities possible. We appreciate you so much, and your continued support really certifies and helps so many of our service members and veterans become character-based coaches in their communities. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our wonderful guests. With us tonight, like I said, is Major General Brian Menase, who currently is serving as the Deputy Commanding General of the 18th Airborne Corps. Brian is a native of Amherst, New York, and commissioned as an infantry officer from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1988. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the United States Military Academy, West Point, and a Master of Military Art and Science degree from the Command and General Staff College. General Menase has served in multiple combat and staff positions to include the 75th Ranger Regiment, Joint Special Operations Command, 82nd Airborne Division, U.S. Army Cadet Command, 10th Mountain Division, and the Department of Army Staff. Brian has commanded from company through the division level. Major General Menase oversees tours and deployments including Sinai Desert and Korea, as well as multiple operational deployments to Panama, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Athletics have been an influence in Brian's life. Both he and his wife, Kelly, are members of the Sweet Home High School Athletics Hall of Fame, courtesy of Will Huff. Kelly played volleyball at West Virginia University. A multi-sport high school athlete, football, hockey, and lacrosse, Brian played Army lacrosse for Hall of Fame coach Jack Emmer. While serving in the Army, Brian began his 35-plus year passion for rugby. A longtime All-Army and Combined Service rugby player, Brian also coached men's rugby at Army West Point and for the Combined Services. And he is sporting the gear with us tonight. Tonight, Coach Menase joins us from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He's a proud father of Ashley, Haley, and Jake. Welcome, General Menase.
Hey, Coach, glad to be here. Sorry, everybody, it took so long to do that intro, and I really appreciate Will writing that up for us. Thank you.
Well, it is super impressive, and we can't wait to dive into your mind of like how you've been able to inspire and lead so many great units over your career. And we're going to hear how that also marries with Coach Matt Sherman's perspective. Coach Matt Sherman is in his 8th year at the helm of Army West Point men's rugby program and the defending men's 15 Division 1A national champions. Coach Sherman joined the Black Knight staff after a 5-year tenure as a director of rugby at Stanford University. With his hiring, he became the first full-time coach in Army West Point men's rugby history, which dates back to 1961. So this past year in 2022, Army West Point Rugby won the Division 1A national championship led by Coach Sherman. While an undergrad at University of California, Berkeley from 2000 to 2003, Sherman was a 3-time All-American and served as team captain under Hall of Fame coach Jack Clark. Matt won 4 national championships with the Bears before moving to play for the U.S. men's national team from 2003 to 2005, where he made 7 appearances, including the 2003 World Cup. Coach Sherman has won a rugby national championship as both a player and a coach. Matt has also represented USA Rugby at the international level as both a player and coach. From 2011 to 2015, Sherman led all rugby efforts at Stanford, including coaching, staffing, recruiting, administration, and scheduling for both men's and women's programs. Under his tutelage, the men's team reached the national quarterfinals twice, and the women's program advanced to the national Final Four 3 times. In addition, he helped the rugby programs fundraise more than $1 million and increased admitted recruits from 0 to 7. Which is a tremendous feat, folks. Anybody who has ever started a sports program from scratch is very, very difficult to be able to get to this level of recruiting scholarship athletes. From 2009 to 2011, Sherman worked with the U.S. men's national team as an assistant coach, working with the back line. His squad produced a victory over Russia in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Sherman got his coaching start in 2007 when he served as the assistant coach for the national champion Bears of Cal Berkeley. He then moved on to his first head coaching stint at San Diego State, producing a national Final Four team and a national quarterfinal squad in his 2-year stint. So, reflecting on that bio, I don't know if you've ever not won a championship. That was pretty impressive, Coach, and we are so grateful to have you here.
I can definitely tell you that I've lost my fair share of games too. But no, I'm very grateful to be here, to learn from General Menase and share, and awesome to see a lot of familiar faces out there. Good to see some old friends joining in. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, those 6 career losses must have been devastating.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, we do want to know the magic of how you've had so much success. That's what tonight is all about. Like, what are the secrets to leading teams to unprecedented success? And both of you have done that. And in our past discussions, some things have really stood out. And something that I want to talk about tonight that we dive deep into with Soldiers to Sidelines is the concept of inspiration. And Coach Sherman, I'm going to turn this over to you first here. You had mentioned in the past that I think West Point rugby has lost more service members in action than any other team sport, and you have reminded everyone of their heroic stories and has made that a part of your program. How has that helped in reminding your team the bigger purpose of life, and how has that helped inspire your team to success?
Yeah, well, it's honestly, it's something that this team and program taught me coming from a civilian background and joining the West Point rugby team. They already did a tremendous job of tying the current team, or stewards, if you will, of our jersey to the larger legacy, as you mentioned, former players who had given full measure for country, which has tremendous meaning in it, but also, not just the past, but thinking about the importance of these young men and what they're going to do in the future representing our country. And of course, for us, we at West Point, that ties in with their future military career. But I think, to your point in question, I think anytime we coach sport, there's so much strength and power if we can connect what we do on the field with greater purpose off the field. And I'm a true believer, as cheesy as it sounds, that the qualities that are going to make a great rugby player, great athlete, great any teammate, or player in a sport will also make a better human, will make a better dad, will make a better son, make a better father, worker, you name it. And so I think the more that, we tie what we do on the field with their lives off the field, their strength and power and motivation that you just can't help but get excited about, it's more meaning and purpose.
That's a tremendous answer. And General Menase, when you hear that, what's your reaction to that? And how do you tie things outside of work, right? The greater life experience to the everyday, ins and outs of military service?
Well, Harrison, I want to coach, I'm inspired by what you just said, frankly. And I think, Harrison, as I heard Coach talk, and I think what rugby and athletics did for me, it was really inspired me to do what Coach talked about. Try to be a good coach, try to be a good leader, try to be a good teammate. I think what I learned, through rugby in that regard, and what I found in the military was very difficult. I found to separate your military role from your just daily role and who you were. I found that the best soldiers were just good people, and it reflected in how they approach life, their team approach, if they had grit, and really sort of weeded out posers. Through athletics and other things that we could see off the field, or excuse me, off the military pitch and on the athletic pitch, it would play out back at work. So certainly, I benefited from mostly inspiration to me to perform in all those regards that Coach talked about, but also, inspired that I had to try to create a competitive, instinct in people, and certainly and the teammates that joined me on the pitch. If we were playing touch in the unit area, whatever, I found great life lessons even in those small games.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is kind of releasing identity or differentiating the personal identity to their role. So it's like your position that you play in rugby and the position that you have in the military. I'm hearing about thinking beyond this, like we are all people first. And that's really important to do. I just think for everyone in life is to understand that, I'm not a husband by identity. That's a role that I play. We're not fathers. We're not teammates. Those are all roles. That's not who we are. And I think that's so important in rugby. Specifically, people want to say that football is like the ultimate team sport. I don't know if those people have a lot of interaction with rugby. I think rugby might even be more of a team sport because of the fluidity of all of this. So with all that said, Coach Sherman, how do you create individual status while at the same time teaching your players that they are more than just the position that they hold on the field for you?
We're getting to that in a second. Just to comment on the general's comments there, I really enjoyed, the All Blacks have a saying, better people make better All Blacks. And I couldn't agree more. And I think the longer I coach, the more I realize that, your character shows up off the field and on the field in similar ways, good and bad. We all have good and bad character facets. So, the more I coach, if I see, there's maybe a guy who's struggling with, accountability, and we say, hey, is this showing up off the field in the classroom? Certainly it will be, right? And so for me, it's got to be a holistic approach. We're developing people, not just players. We're building better habits. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think I'm going to have these great habits as a rugby player on the field, but have horrible habits off the field and not think that they're going to blend into each other. I don't think that works like that. Certainly some things we enjoy more, so maybe we're more motivated, but our habits as men, women, as people, become pervasive through all arenas that we dabble in. So I just couldn't agree more with what he said. And to your point about identity, I'm not sure if this is where you were going with the question, but I guess maybe, getting the most out of people. I think for me personally, I know anytime I've done something really well, I'm very confident. I'm in the moment. I'm not doubting myself. I feel comfortable in the environment and with the people around me. So I think as a leader, I think a big part of our job is trying to create that environment where people can thrive and flourish. And of course, we want to challenge people and always push them to new edges and get better. But we need them to be comfortable with that, with failure, right? To embrace the unknown, the courage zone, to push themselves. And in a team sport, certainly to build relationships of trust where they can be themselves and they can be confident and they can fail around others. I think that's a massive part of coaching. And it brings out personal identity in people. I think anytime you get somebody new to the team, right, they're usually pretty reserved. And then you kind of have an aha moment where you see a guy really come out of his skin and it's like, okay, now he's himself, now we're going to see what this guy can do really. But until then, it's you're getting a percentage of that guy.
I love that answer, actually. And the reason I love that answer is you you separate identity from role by really not even addressing it, just treating them like people. Everything I just heard you say was developing character, accountability, the humanity of who that person is rather than the player, right? You talk about them exhibiting these characteristics, in the classroom and other aspects of our lives. So by attuning to that and treating them this way, that I think builds character and builds the person, right? And understands that, like, hey, I'm more than just this position on this team, especially in coach's eyes, because he cares more about me beyond this. And that does it. And General Menase, when you hear that, you were just alluding to that, like, being more than just the job. What's your reaction to what Coach just said?
Well, I'm actually taking notes on what Coach, every time Coach speaks, I'm trying taking leadership notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to step back a little bit, Harrison. I think what you said was really important about football being the ultimate team sport. I think it is an incredible sport, but as I look at our athletes, the rugby athlete, why I was really attracted to it was, it was, back to Coach said about work ethic and inspiration and getting people to develop. What I see is probably one of the most incredible athletes in all sports. These are persons that are tremendously big. You look at all backs front row, and they can run if they needed to all 80 minutes. And then all those athletes, even though they do specialize in certain areas, have to tackle, have to catch the ball, have to run and support, have to ruck, have to maul, have to catch high balls. And that's where I think there's, more towards, I guess, basketball or hockey, where everybody's got to sort of be able to do everything. But you have that in a 15-person, sports competition that I don't know can better replicate stuff that, many of the men and women I see on the screen have had to go through in combat, where we all have to, we might have a specialty, but, you all might have to, rush and help a buddy. You all might have to get on the radio and call for help. And so what I found, as you said, ultimate team sport, maybe like backtrack, I think combat is the ultimate team sport. Now that I think about it, rugby is the closest thing that you can do consistently, as Coach said, to develop, I think, those very, very, very important traits, even grit, resiliency, be able to recover. And, as Coach talked about the All Blacks, I was so impressed. I spent a couple of days with them when I was playing with the combined service team down there, just sort of watching how they, went about their business on training prep was incredible. So I'm with Coach in a lot of these areas about what that sport does for, character development and leadership. Over.
And so, General, I want to hear more about how rugby really aligns in this team aspect to combat. So you said combat's number one, rugby's number two, and then probably everything else is after that. And I couldn't agree more. I'm a football coach, right? So in my experience with rugby, you can see it. The way that the sport is played and the way everybody comes together to achieve those objectives, it's a little bit more intimate. The roles, although specific, have to be coordinated like precisely together. There's actual like close touching the whole time. I think that really adds to this element, and there's a sense of selflessness, right, for the greater good of the team that just naturally comes through. And in that, I think that also helps like erode this concept of personal identity, because you're now more part of the team. So as that happens, from your firsthand experience, General, your experience with rugby and combat, talk about the similarities and how rugby has aided in your leadership in combat.
Well, I think, and what the sport attracts, I think, Coach and I were talking I think we were talking before about how many people on the rugby team go combat arms. And I think, in terms of our sport, I think that's really, really important distinction that, the men and women from those teams choose to then progress into, what could be, sort of, frontline activities. Matter of fact, I saw one of those kids like Coach Brandon McCarthy. He's going to be the operations officer for Delta Force. Okay, so the best team on the globe for combat, and one of our athletes that I think was inspired to go combat arms by what folks like Coach and Rich Polito and folks in the environment we created. I think they had a huge class, 21 people graduated. I think 17 went infantry or something ridiculous like that. Scott Heron, Eric Ewelton, who unfortunately just passed, Andrew Locke, Ranger Regimental guys, Delta Force operators, people burning it down. So I think, what I liked about what our program did there was, as Coach said, it was develop, teammates that, understand the value of teamwork, understood the value of selfless service towards each other, understood the value of fitness. So even as I watch the great teammates now, Harrison, what I'm attracted to is the people who understand even fitness fundamentals that go right back to the point I had. Hey, you got to be able to run 90 minutes, and you got to be able to sprint, and then you got to be able to do, activities that are, really high intensity tackling drills and stuff like this. So we have watched our people who have been rugby players, do very well in service. To me, it's inspired technical competence in technical development. And I don't want to bore you, but when I first playing combined service rugby, we went on a tour to New Zealand again, and we had a coach. What the hell was his name? Martin Kingston, who was coaching at Harvard at the time, and similar to Coach, demanded excellence at the basics. And we had a lot of players there. Shoot, we had several Eagles there, and Coach kept taking us back to the basics to run the drills, which I was really impressed with. And the amount of time and how he explained each of the techniques, was really, it was inspirational to me, that I later learned how to apply that to how to shoot, or how to maneuver with a buddy, or how to call for fire. That I got through watching Coach Sherman and Coach Kingston and Mike. We had Kevin Flynn, matter of fact, is a guest coach who was an awesome. I think he's working up in Seattle now. And he was an incredible representative to show us what right looked like. All is to say, I think, like you're trying to do with Soldiers to Sidelines, is show folks an opportunity to what creating a good team takes, and the amount of effort it takes. And that's what I think I was more and more impressed as I went through my rugby career, of really usually how bad we were as we started a journey together in a military club. And our wish that we had technically competent people to coach skills. And then, we could, when we actually started playing well, we would attract others. And so, that success begat other success that, I thought was really important to all of our development. And one last thing, and through these opportunities, if you guys know, what am I thinking? Mosey Timoteo. So the post-coaching opportunities in a military environment, at Fort Drum, I think Mosey was probably there towards, probably someone can help me out, early 90s. I think he's got like 35 Eagle caps. But I'm not saying that Fort Drum was the sole reason that he continued or found rugby after he came from, the islands. But it certainly did contribute. Next thing you know, he's playing all service. He's getting looks. He's at the ITTs with us, and he was that good. He makes the Eagles like 2 years later. So, I think all these opportunities that are created, Harrison. I could talk for days about different experience and how it's touched us and our different people in so many ways. Over.
Wow. I heard you talk about developing teams and the process of that, where you talked about starting off and you saying like, oh, we weren't that good, and then we got better at it. And I want to hear from Coach Sherman. What is your approach to building teams, right? So when you have a freshman come in, or a new group of rugby players, what's your approach to making these individuals come together as a team, and then hopefully winning the national championship like you did last year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know how simple of an answer I can give, but I would definitely say for us, we start with culture, because for me, that's going to determine, how we learn as a group. We want to be the fastest learning team, that we can be, and the fastest learning team in the country. I believe it was David Petraeus. I was watching him speak one time, and he said, the team that wins the fastest or learns the fastest wins. And I agree, because everything's always changing, and that's the only thing you own anyways. If the All Blacks join the collegiate, rugby conference this year, we're not going to win a championship, so I don't consider it failure if we don't win that, but we want to be the best we can be. And that's based off culture. So for us, that culture piece, to dig a little deeper there, starting with your first point, it's about providing greater purpose and meaning. What are we a part of? I think that's why a lot of people join the military. When we recruit guys to West Point, a lot of their interest stems from, I want to be part of something bigger than myself, right? That has meaning. And so for us, it's our legacy, who's come before us, what our men hope to do when they graduate, and how important that is, to harness that, strength that comes, and motivation that comes from that. But then, this is my basic belief as a coach. Yes, I want to win. I'm as competitive as the next guy, but I believe I only own 50% of that equation. The opposition has a vote, or the enemy has a vote, as the Army says, and I don't own that vote. I get my side. So for me, then, well, how do I drive that performance? Well, we want to be the fastest improving team we can be. Well, what dictates that? Our culture, and then what drives that? Our behavior. And so for us, that's where I'm hyper focused as a coach. And instead of saying, hey, we want to behave well, like we use 3 specific values for our team that's gonna guide our behavior. And I know if we have a issue, if you will, with a guy, usually it's because they're not living one of those values. Well, always it's because they're not living one of those values. So instead of waiting for a guy maybe to mess up, we try and define the behaviors we want, and celebrate the the crap out of them every time we see it, so we really start there. Culture in terms of tying into a greater meaning and defining the behaviors we need to build that culture of excellence to drive our most vertical rate of improvement. We call it our climb, and hopefully get some results at the end of the day. So that's the foundation for me, and then just briefly to go up, then you got to be physically fit. It doesn't matter how skillful you are, what plan you have. Then to coach, to General Menase's point, like then it's about skills. Skills, not schemes for me. If you can't pass the ball, it doesn't matter what sort of slick, backline move you have. And by the way, everyone in the world of rugby runs the same backline moves. It's just who's got better skills to run it more accurately and precisely that gets it right. So yeah, for me, it's culture, physical fitness, skills, and then the schemes go the cherry on top, and it's hard because I think all of us in coaching, it's the first thing you want to do is what's the plan, and yeah, I love that stuff, the plan, but it's useless if you don't have those other blocks in place first.
So, Coach Sherman, you're now hired by Soldiers to Sidelines because you beautifully articulated our intro course at all of our seminars called the Inverted Pyramid of Coaching Success. And that is specifically what you said. This is what every single soldier coach learns on the first day, that coaching success starts with inspiration first. That's where you have to spend almost all of your time developing inspiration. Then motivating. So it's the perpetuation of that. Then fitness, then technique, right? And then strategy. Like that's the order. And you just said it so beautifully. So you're hired. We don't pay money, so you get to work for free. And just
Neither does rugby coaching, really. So yeah, it's great.
awesome. And as I look at the chat here, and based to dovetail off what you were saying, Raymond Terry put in a really cool question in the chat, and rarely do we do this on this Coaching Legends and American Heroes show, but Raymond, would you want to unmute yourself and then ask both General Menase and Coach Sherman your question about character? Not sure if you're prepared for that. Well, I will go ahead and ask on his behalf. Raymond Terry was wondering how you develop base character on a large scale, like a league. So how do you coach coaches to develop good base character traits in athletes?
Sir, I'll defer to you first there.
Yeah, I was gonna see if you wanted that one, Matt. Actually, that's a huge part of our responsibility, and I think what Coach accurately describes is again, shared values. We're fortunate in the Army to have 7 core values. Honor is our top value, which basically has 6 below it, which is you need to be a person who understands loyalty, duty, respect, personal courage, integrity, and selfless service. And so it's a leadership acronym, but honor is raised above that says, hey, I'll live up to those other 6 values. So it sort of starts with that from a values perspective. And I think, as Coach said, the good teams that I watch, start with that. Are we being selfless? Are we loyal to the institution? Are we not only doing what we're told, but are we seeking constantly how to be a good teammate? Are we a person that, folks can rely on and have integrity? And I think that's, basis one. But I do then, as a coach, back to your inverted pyramid, okay, we get the inspiration going. We're living by shared values. We have respect for each other. Maybe that develops some empathy, but, you got to start putting it together. So, developing people that can develop others is really difficult. We spend, in the 18th Airborne Corps, which is about 92,000 people, the majority of my time is coaching coaches. Every meeting I had today, I mean, I probably spent, Harrison, today 90% of my day coaching. It was we're deactivating a unit at Fort Benning. What else did we do? Oh, we're outloading a unit for a rapid deployment to Europe. Trying to think what else we did. We're prepping to rapid deploy another unit, and the outload process, everything we got to do, the fundamental components. Fortunately, I've been coached by others, and I've got to try to figure out how to coach them. And so, in an enterprise this big, you have coaches in all different areas, from human resource stuff to logistics and maintenance, and physical fitness, and how to shoot and stuff like that. So, what you describe is really important. And I'm back to then, as Coach said, the understanding that it's my responsibility as a head coach to develop the subordinate coaches to make sure they're in harmony with our values and they're going to go the direction that we want to go. And so that I think is really important. That I think rugby helps teach that. Maybe as football does. As a head coach, you got to understand the offensive coordinator's responsibility, right? You've got to be, as a head coach, deep enough in each area. Certainly you've got to be wide enough to know it all, but you've got to be deep enough to judge good or bad, right? So multiply that in rugby times 15, multiply that in the Army times thousands, and you can realize how important it is to have those shared values, be able to communicate your intent, and then be present enough to drive things. And I think a lot of us struggle with even the essence of being there to drive the outcomes you want. Like, I can't imagine Coach Sherman ever missing a practice, right?
No.
Right. But that's about being selfless and dedicated, where I struggle mightily, frankly, to make sure that my leaders are at PT, frankly. And then trying to inspire them to be there to want to coach is another challenge. Like most of the people I'm looking at the screen probably would love to be at a fitness session with a bunch of 20-year-olds, right? But I'm still struggling to, have shared values, say, hey, it's your responsibility to be there, that you should be driving this thing. And I'm talking most about my failures now, but I think what you just said, Harrison, is really, really important. Now, a lot of our soldiers have some of that, particularly at different levels coming out, and they've seen it. Probably the people that would be attracted to the Soldiers to Sidelines are probably, already having experienced this and enjoy, that opportunity that I get most every day. But I think in a nutshell, it's a huge endeavor and ridiculously important, particularly as you're running, a large organization.
And that's exactly what Soldiers to Sidelines is doing. Like we're trying to develop coaches to become character-based coaches so they can develop the character and all the athletes around them. I mean, that's the mission. And to your point, General, it's just very difficult to do. It's tough. And if you follow the inverted pyramid of coaching success that Coach Sherman just talked about, the second bar there is motivation. And General, when I heard you talk, your day to day, you called yourself a coach, and you are. And I would contend to everybody on this call that we're all coaches every single day in every aspect of our life, whether you realize it or not, because like those are the things that we're doing. And General, I heard you talk about motivation there and how challenging it is, right? So you said, trying to get folks to do PT, and ultimately, I think everybody on this call, it's always challenging to get people to do what they should do over what they want to do, right? So I imagine everybody you interface with would tell you, yeah, it's important for us to be in shape. Like Coach Sherman, your players know, yeah, we got to be physically fit. But then why is it so difficult to get people to show up to PT and to actually do the things that are difficult? So therein lies our ability to constantly think about how we are motivating, like how are we establishing why we have to do these things that we should do over what we want to do. And then how can we remind them of this other than just us telling them that ad nauseum? And then we actually have to do it. So Coach Sherman, how do you motivate on the daily when your players, seem to not want to do the things that they should do, and your efforts to get them to want to do those things?
For me, I guess I'd say it starts with, relationships, understanding, people's individual whys, why they want to be here, what are they hoping to achieve, and then a lot of it's about helping them connect the dots to the inputs needed to get to the output that they want. If you got the right people on the bus, but you may also find out in that process you get the wrong people on the bus, so that's useful as well. But I think, yeah, the why is really important. I think back to like that original culture question, I think for me it's about, or the behavior question, I guess, that came in on the chat. It's and this is going to relate to what you just asked, but I think it's really important to define expectations in terms of behaviors. I really think, like, leaving that vague, just saying being a good teammate. I think you need to define what that looks like. For us, I think it's really helped us when we've used values and certain questions to define yes or no. Am I doing these things that we need to do to build a culture of excellence? But just to go further, I think we just had the author of that book, Legacy. I know we brought up the All Blacks a few times. He just came to West Point. And one of the things that really stuck with me, he said, people rise to a challenge if it's their challenge. And, nobody loves doing things because they're just getting told to do them, or they don't want to get yelled at. We want to do things because we want to do things, and we want to be great, And so I think there's a coach over there, Wayne Smith, famous coach, one with the All Blacks, just one with the Black Ferns, the women's team, against all odds. He tries to go through whole days without making statements, just by asking questions, just to peel back people's learning and understanding of people. I think that's incredibly noble of him, and effective. If you have you have to take the patience. It's the long road. It's the infinite sort of game. But I think if you can, like for us, building those behaviors and building that, defining that behavior. I don't just give our coaches and team leaders that. We meet with them and ask the question: what do we need to do? What are we trying to achieve? What do we need to do to achieve it? Okay, that's what you want to do. Those are the inputs required. All right, I'm just going to hold you accountable to those things, right? Like you said you wanted to do those things, and I'm also going to celebrate. And I think this is really important. Celebrate every chance I get when someone's doing things right, because I'm a young dad. I got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 girls. And the one thing I've realized from being a dad, which was a great lesson, is, we are born innately selfish, right? Like we are not born to serve others. We're born to serve ourselves. And all these behaviors we ask of our players and our teams, it's the opposite of human nature. It's not human nature to just go out and work hard. It's not human nature to put others ahead of yourself. It's the opposite, And so one of my favorite Army sayings is doing the harder right. The wrong is usually 99% of the time easier. But we want people to choose the harder, more fulfilling right. And so I think when they do that, it's really important that we recognize that, because again, I think people are more inspired to do things if they think, man, I'm going to get recognized for doing that, versus I'm going to do this because I don't want to get yelled at for doing the wrong thing. Right. I think we all kind of relate to that. So I don't know, I went a bit sideways with your question there, but
No, you didn't. I think it's right on, because now I think this is one of the misunderstandings in leadership, right? We have these leadership talks, and we take these bits of wisdom, and quite frankly, there's tons of them on this call already right now. But there's like this myth that developing coaches to develop character and leadership is linear, like this. And we all know it's not. We stumble, we fall, we make mistakes. Our players make mistakes. Every single one of us on this call has done that in the past. So then what do? How do you handle your players, Coach Sherman, Coach Menase, when someone doesn't exhibit those behaviors that you explicitly defined, Coach Sherman? Like, is it binary, or is this a continuum? And then how do you respond? And how does that illustrate great character to everybody else that's watching?
Yeah, well, I'd answer that. I mean, I think like the longer I coach, the more two things kind of stand out to me, for me personally, is one, you have to address it early, and always, right? Don't let, I call them the pinches, right? The little pinches where you're like, yeah, that wasn't quite right. And it's so easy to be like, oh, I'll deal with that later. And we don't. And then it builds up and builds up and builds up. And then we usually have an incident. But it's so important to address it when it is small. But I like the second point is I think trying to address issues with love versus like you suck. I think the more, I read a great book. I'm trying to think of the title right now, which talks about, hey, there's kind of like different truths in every situation. There's the action, which is objective, right? We can say this thing happened. And then there's my interpretation and other people's interpretations, and those are subjective. And so for me, again, like addressing issues with love, instead of going to a guy and say, I wouldn't say this, of course, but you suck because, this, you know, going more with the approach of, hey, do you remember when you did XYZ action? Yes. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. How do you think that might have been, interpreted by your teammates, or what effect do you think that might have had on others? And now I'm very blessed, right? I get to coach some of the most selfless guys already. So I take this with a grain of salt, but for my guys here, 9 times out of 10, I don't even have to show them where they went wrong. Right in that moment, they're like, yeah, I know, like that wasn't very good. And it's like, now I'm on their team helping them identify an issue. I'm not that guy who's just yelling at them, for, because they screwed up and they're not good enough, right? We're helping elevate them versus, I guess, how they could perceive a correction, which is pushing them down. So that's just something I think I've learned over time has been more effective when we can take that approach. I don't always have the patience to do it, but yeah.
Certainly. And it's easier to do this when it's a technical issue, but if it's a lapse in character, it becomes it's tougher, right? And we're talking about developing character in these young folks, right? And so part of it is handling it when it's not linear growth, and that can be challenging. So Coach Menase, what's your reaction to that, and how do you handle this curvy linear growth model of developing character in teams and individuals?
Yeah, and I was listening to Coach again. I guess what Coach benefits from, and we all as coaches benefit from, is a scoreboard repeatedly. So some of the feedback you get is one loss or penalty or whatever, or failures you see in preparation that directly relate to the weekend's events. So, I do think what we often lack in the Army, particularly, is the bottom line. Like if I've got leaders not showing for PT and I'm not there, I sort of can feel it next time I'm there based on the reaction of the people I'm watching with the leader, so I can sort of figure out if he or she's been there without, taking, attendance every day for where all my leaders are. Albeit, I think what Coach talked a little bit about is helpful, that it's habits. It is accountability. So I really value work ethic. I value people willing to do work. I value people with an entrepreneurial spirit trying to win. And I do understand that, part of our as leaders responsibility is to develop that. Like, not, as Coach said, people aren't born with that. So, you sort of gotta, even though give them the why for, like keep getting to fitness or marksmanship. But what I found is until they start feeling it physically, whether, it's beginning, doing a great course of fire, or being well coached for, how to use your gun appropriately, or, a physical fitness event, it's a combination of accountability, being there with them, making them feel it so that they're feeling good about what they're doing. In addition to the obvious things that we've got to do, as Coach says, is, correct the wrong. I'm sort of a Ted Lasso sort of advocate for trying to, help people see themselves and bring out the best in everybody. And that really, he's got a quote that he doesn't care about the win losses. It's all about personal development, which, as what Coach described, is probably true. Whether he wins a national championship next year or this year is certainly significant to what he's there to do. But at the same token, if he has a bunch of folks go out and end up serving honorably in the Army and they're awesome people, he wins, right? We all win. And so, I could probably talk about days, but I think it is certainly accountability. It's helping them feel, the why. And, obviously you want them to take over the same spirit of drive that Coach exhibits. which I think is, as you said, Harrison, is very difficult to do in its outset and has to be matured over time. I personally, although I think I came into the service with a good work ethic, I didn't know what to work on, so having a shepherd, take me to places that, hey, what do I need to spend my time on and who do I need to be coached by, was a really important life lesson. And I think I'm going to continue to hop around here. What I found was to be critical of my coaches, but I couldn't be critical until I was a better coach, does that make sense? Because when I was meandering, as I recall, as a lieutenant, unfortunately, I didn't really have a company commander or anybody in my life. And people say that today's Army is not as good as last Army. They're both, it's BS. I didn't have anybody in my life as, above me, except for just sort of moving through it. And, what I did finally start being critical of what was being presented to me. Whether it was a sergeant trying to run some sort of event and then respectfully, understanding that he wasn't coaching my people or us well. And then his coach says, trying to figure out how to maneuver and make him a winner, even though he was losing in those particular episodes, was remarkably difficult. And it took me a minute to sort myself out. All is to say, what I learned again by coaching is coaching prep. You can't just walk out to practice and expect some sort of miracle. You've got to have prep, which, is, back to you said, Harrison, is investment in the people and help set them up for success. So obviously we could talk for days about the topic, but I really appreciate you bringing it up.
We will talk about it for days because this is our favorite thing to talk about. So you have a family here at Soldiers to Sidelines. And let's keep exploring it. And I think Coach Sherman brought up a great point that really is special to my heart because it's something I really believe in. He talked about asking questions. And in Soldiers to Sidelines, we frequently say the best coaches are the best question askers. And a lot of times when we are leaders or coaches, it's like directing down, like we are showing people how to do right. And Coach Sherman talked about, well, why don't we just ask them? And sometimes they will just lead us in the right direction, or at least in the direction that they want to be led. And to your point, Coach Sherman, I actually, one year when I was teaching a master's class at George Washington University, I spent the entire semester teaching by only asking questions. Not one class, the whole semester. And boy, that was a huge growth opportunity for me because you have to get very good at asking the right question at the right time. So when you hear all this, Coach Sherman, talk to us about how you do ask those questions, like the role of being a coach versus a facilitator, because it sounds like your strength is facilitating the growth of the individual rather than talking at them or telling them.
I'd say I think that's the goal for me. I wouldn't say I do this all the time, certainly, and probably even if you ask my players, probably less often than more often. But for me, I guess I'd share that. I think it is more valuable. I think it's a longer play. It takes we all feel the pressure of time, certainly as we're building teams and but I think the more you let them figure things out, it becomes ingrained in them. They build that knowledge, they develop those skills, those traits. And I think, and again, that ties to motivation as well. Am I doing this for some guy who doesn't yell at me, or am I doing this because he's helped me see that this is what I want, what I need to do to achieve that, what we need to do to achieve that? It's not, ultimately, it's not my team, it's their team, right? And so, it's about, I think the more you can guide them to the answers, but they're their answers, again, back to that quote, it's people rise to a challenge if it's their challenge. And I believe that, and so, yeah, again, I wouldn't profess to be great or even good at this. I was thinking about the session the other day. I think, we had a walkthrough, and I think only 6 other guys talked during the session. I remember kicking myself afterwards because I was like, it was too much of me, you know. But I think being mindful of it is maybe a first step. So
Yeah, because you know, although we hold these positions and we get older, like your title is head coach, I agree with you. We're always working to get better. And this is a practice. Like this is a coaching practice we're all part of. This is a leadership practice. And we just hope to get a little bit better at it every single day. And maybe someone else thinks we're good at it, and that would be awesome. And as we get older, General, I want to ask you this, and you too, Coach Sherman, as we get older, who's coaching us? Like it can get lonely. You're sitting here, you're leading all these men all the time. And if we are working on this coaching practice, like who you confide in now? And maybe it's like your old rugby coaches when you're in high school or college or what have you. But now, today, where do you look for this guidance, wisdom, affirmation?
Yeah, I think, Harrison, for me, it's the people I work with and lead. I maybe, as we talked about, asking questions of subordinates, I'm asking questions to make, am I producing? So I'm very critical of, if we're not winning at a task, and I know it's the old adage, the first person I'm looking at is me, right? And so I think coaches are the same way. If we're not, if the skills aren't being developed, I mean, we got certainly, I know my athletes, or I know my teammates, how is it that we are not winning? How is it we're not accomplishing a task? And so trying to recoach or redesign myself to, present matters to, get the inspiration, get the accountability, get our shared values, show them love. And even in that regard is having that empathy to understand their love language, right? So we know that people respond differently to different stimulus, right? So, whether it's just affirmation, or I got to give that guy, some sort of wacky certificate saying he's the best, you way to be Johnny today, you got it. Or, hey man, you're letting us down. I mean, that word right there would kill, 20% of my people. 8% would walk away. Hey, who cares? I let the boss down. And so I think, to what you said, Harrison, I think it's studying ourselves constantly and constantly evaluating ourselves. And I think the next is self-study. Certainly I'm from a management perspective, driving outcomes in an organizational structure. John Lohr writes a great book, Measure What Matters, that, he's an amazing entrepreneur that, I was attracted to because it helped us define specific metrics, and then, a counseling scheme from a business perspective about how to get them there. I took a lot of lessons out of that book, that helped me better organize myself and potentially be, more productive for my team. So for me, it's studying down, it's studying what I should be, maybe asking questions, and I don't think I'm very good at it, but trying to be, not completely arrogant that I know what's right in every instance. So, maybe, being open to comments and criticism. Back to you, Coach. I see anything from you.
yeah, no, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's just you're growing or you're dying. It's just continued education all the time. I'm obsessed with reading about coaching, leadership, all of it. So just in my own personal development, I'm very, I think that the principles of leadership are kind of always a bit dynamic, and always trying to learn more. I've personally, I have some mentors that have played a huge role in my life. One was a former aviator colonel, Steve Dwyer. Steve, sir, but I think he was 160th helicopter pilot, and he, when I came to West Point, he started working for me or with me pro bono. He now is retired and is a CEO coaching, and he's really changed my life in a very positive way. I think primarily because he got me to be more secure with my own failures and shortcomings. He got me, I think, willing to see like, hey, it's, embrace that you're not perfect but use that as opportunities to grow. It's the same thing I'd ask of my players. But when we're the leader, sometimes I think we got to be foolproof but I think he really got me to think, no, the best way I could become a better coach for them is become a better me, become a better coach. And then the third prong for me would be feedback from my players. Part of that process with him was getting more feedback from the people that I lead, that I serve. And that's been eye-opening. And I've had to take some hard looks at myself over the last 3-4 years as I've really gone through that process. But it's one of the best comments I got, and we do a survey every term. Every week I send out an email with an anonymous link if they want to say something that they can push up. But we do a survey every term that they need to fill out. And again, it's anonymous. But one of the comments was, I feel like Coach Sherman is improving maybe as fast as anybody right now on the team. And like at first, if I'd seen that 4 years ago, I probably would have gotten a bit defensive. Well, like, I'm the coach. I don't, but now I see that as a real compliment. It's like, I'm working as hard as they are to get better. And their feedback guided most of that, telling me, where my shortcomings were. So I think if I can get that stuff from the people I lead, it's really helpful for my development, even though sometimes it hurts, man. It stings, but it's good. It's good.
I love it. And we're approaching the top of the hour here. I can tell you, who I lean on. I have a tight group of folks, a very small group of folks that I trust deeply to give me really hard truths, but they're friends that can do it compassionately, right? So as much as it stings, coach, they have a way of not like bludgeoning me with it. So that helps. And I know my wife helps me out a lot, like a confidant that I can really talk to. And ultimately, folks, it's all of you on this call. So Coach Sherman, even today, like I know for me, hearing you, I just took a lot out of it. And, I start to feel like this visceral connection. Same thing with you, General Menase, is like, it's like, I feel this when I hear from my peers too, that want to talk about leadership and really talk about coaching from a place of humility, where it's not how to do it. It's just, this is what I've seen to work for me. This is what doesn't. Do you have any insight? And this kind of like open dialogue has helped me. And I just love hearing this from you. So I just can't thank you enough for providing all these wisdom, because I think all of us on this call just got a little bit better. And there was a lot of talk about New Zealand tonight, and I just want everyone to know that on the call tonight is Brigadier General Mike Sheplin from New Zealand Defense Force. So we had a Kiwi representing tonight. And also on this call, I just can't help but think one of my newest friends in Kristen Noto just wrote this book called Live Epic. And EPIC is an acronym that she came up with, excellence personified in character. And it resonates with a lot of what you said, General Menase, and what you said, Coach Sherman. So kudos to you, Kristen. Thanks for being here, and love reading your book. And without further ado, I hope everyone has an awesome night. General, you're going to come back, and we are going to hear you talk for weeks and hours and hours and hours, because I can't get enough of it. I mean, anytime you want, please join us. Please talk. It is never not enough. It's fantastic. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night.